girls, and welcome to Season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
I cannot even believe that we are here. The first official interview of Season 3. And I am telling you, we held nothing back because I get to introduce you to the first guest of this season, my friend Loyda. I met Loyda through Simply Beautiful, a conference we talk about frequently on Hey Girl. And I also want to let you know it is coming up. And I can't believe how fast time is going, but our 6th year of Simply Beautiful is going to be October 20th in Uxbridge, Massachusetts. If you have not registered, absolutely go to berea.org and register. You don't want to miss out on this. It's teen girls, moms, mentors. There's something for everyone. And I'm telling you, the team that we have built for this year is phenomenal. Like, my daughter is going, and I have actually been emotional thinking about how incredible it is that these are the people that are going to be speaking into my daughter's life and encouraging her in her journey. Because let's be real, mamas, there's a certain age where, not that she doesn't listen to me, but it is going to mean something even more powerful for her to hear these things from all different voices, all different people. So I am pumped. Loyda has actually taught Zumba at our Simply Beautiful conferences in our early years. I have loved her from the moment I met her. She has just this life about her and this presence when she enters a room that you can't help but really, really like her. So here's the thing. We both admitted after the whole interview that even though we have technically known each other for years, this is the first time we have really sat down and I've gotten to hear her story. And I felt really convicted. I'm glad I have Hey Girl and I love doing this, but just that I need to do this more in everyday life when I'm with my girlfriends or just friends, is to take time and ask them about their lives and their story, because I have not gotten through one interview for Hey Girl and not been encouraged or inspired or challenged by all of these stories. And they don't always have to happen in front of a microphone. So that has been what I took out of this today, hearing her story. Now, Loyda has walked some difficult roads, and I appreciate so much in this interview how she opens up and is so vulnerable and honest about her journey and the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. And if you listen to Hey Girl, we are huge fans of vulnerability, as in we love it when people are vulnerable, but let's be real, we hate it when we have to be vulnerable. But something about vulnerability, it breeds vulnerability. It frees other people to tell their story and to be honest about what they're walking through. So I'm praying today that Loyda's story does just that it inspires you, that it encourages you. My one specific prayer for each one of you as you listen is that God would encourage your heart today, that no matter where you're at in your journey, that's where He wants to meet you. If you're in a place of questioning or doubt, if you're in a place of celebration and joy, if you're in a place of mourning or anger, that is the place that God wants to meet you. And that's my prayer for you today. Enjoy this interview with my friend Loyda.
I was born in Puerto Rico, and I came to the United States when I was 4. So I learned English as a second language. Grew up in Boston. Sophomore year, we moved to New Hampshire. And so I graduated high school in New Hampshire. Then we moved to Florida. After my freshman year of college, I met Dane. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah, I'm not going to let you get off that easy. But that was a nice try.
I was really young. I was 20, right out of my freshman year of college. So let me backtrack a little bit. When I was in between my junior year of high school and my senior year, I went on a mission trip to India. And I have always wanted to be a National Geographic photographer.
Really?
I did. I wanted to do that. And so I thought, I want to travel the world, take pictures. But really what I wanted to do was work with people. So then I thought, I'm going to be an anthropologist. And then...
Of course.
And then somewhere when we lived in New Hampshire, my church had a missions conference, and we met this missionary. I had never met a missionary before, so I was like 17 or something. And this lady came, and I loved her story. I thought it was awesome what she was doing. She left her country, went to work somewhere else, helping the people, especially getting them to know Jesus. And I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I've been looking for. I didn't know that job existed. And along the way, I went to someone's house from church, and on their table they had this brochure for Teen Missions International. It was a bright cover, and I was like, what is this? And so I picked it up and I looked at it, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And they had this brochure with all these different trips and all these different things you could do for the summer. And I asked them, can I take this with me? They're like, yeah, take it home with you. And it was like in the spring, ending my junior year. And I said, I want to do this, Mom and Dad. And they're like, sure. And so I picked like the furthest trip I could do, Papua New Guinea. And I needed to raise like $4,000 in like 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And so you had to like list different trips that you wanted to do, like your top 5 in case one of them was full. And so I picked like Papua New Guinea and like India and like Mongolia. Just my parents are like, why don't you pick something closer to home, like Mexico? That way, in case something happens, we can come and get you. I was like, oh, that's boring. It's so close. So
this has to be the first story, I have to say, that I've heard parents being like, you should go to Mexico. Because as a youth pastor, running mission trips to Mexico, I often had the opposite, where parents like, can we go anywhere else?
Right.
Like, it seems dangerous.
Well, this was, I'm a little bit older than you, and I think just a little bit. Anyway, so I picked my teams, and I picked Mexico or Guatemala, somewhere closer than India, for my dad's sake. And when I got the letter back, they said I had been picked to go on the trip to India. And my dad was like, that's great, but I don't know if I want you to go to India. So I was praying. I said, I really want to do this trip, Dad. And there was a couple of things hindering me. One of them was that I needed to have a certain amount of money, like, by the end of the week. And so it was really cool because my pastor said, well, you can come and speak on Sunday morning, tell about what you're going to do, and let's just see what the Lord does. And by the end of that day, someone had handed me the check for the deposit. And so it was like the first time I really saw God working in my life, answering prayer very specifically and very, very clearly. But my dad still wasn't convinced. And so at that time, my dad was a church planter, and he had started a church. We had lived in Boston, and when we moved from Boston to New Hampshire, he had left a church plant in Boston in the care of somebody. Maybe that he had worked to get a pastor for that church, but because he wasn't an ordained pastor, he couldn't pastor. So we had to find somebody. So we would travel from New Hampshire to Boston on Sundays to worship there. And on the way to church one morning, shortly after that, the church was right behind Forest Hills train station. And this was when the train was still above. And over Forest Hill Station, there was a big Visit India sign. And my dad's like, okay, God, I asked you for a sign, and you literally gave it to me.
Literally.
I guess she's going to India.
That's amazing. Was it like on fire too? Because that would really take it to the next level. Or neon lights. I've asked for those signs before.
Yeah. Yes, I have too.
Wow. So you went to India.
So I went to India. My parents, I'm like second generation. My grandparents were very involved in church ministry. My grandfather was like a deacon, and just very, very involved. The only person more involved was probably the pastor. So he opened the church, closed the church, ran probably every single ministry. My grandmother was very involved. And so my dad was also very involved, both my parents. And so my dad eventually became a pastor. That was just part of our life. But I was always in churches that were very small. From what I remember, churches that were very small. So, like, I used to help my dad lead worship, and I'd play the tambourine, And then,
Yes!
and then also I remember teaching second grade Sunday school when I was like 13. I was teaching these kids. I was the teacher, not a helper. I was the teacher.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a youth group. I never really knew kids my age that loved the Lord, like fervently like I did. I remember when I was younger, we were in a church, but I was little. So 6, 7, 8 growing up. And then we, moved to other churches. And I just don't remember having other kids my age. And that, I think, was really super important to me. I always felt really left out. I went to Catholic school, and everybody in my neighborhood was Irish Catholic. And I was the only Hispanic evangelical. I didn't fit in. I tried to get my little friends from the neighborhood to do youth group. And so I tried to start a youth group with them. And they always wanted to do the fun stuff, like go bowling and stuff like that. But when it came time to Bible study, they were out of there. I became a member of our church when I was 12. So I think that was like my own starting to wanting to just be part of that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like an adult world for me. And so trying to find that place. And even in school, I went to Boston Public School, so even there it was hard to find a place for me. When I was in Catholic school, it was hard to find a place for me because I knew all the answers in religion class. It was like me and the altar boys who would answer the questions, I remember one time we had to go to every single mass. And one time when I went to one of the masses, I snuck up to get communion. And then when I went back to my chair, the nun was waiting for me at the pew. She's like, don't ever do that again. She didn't want me to take communion because I wasn't Catholic. And I'm like, but I love Jesus too,
I love the heart that God gave you at such a young age, and that desire to kind of gather kids together. I just think that's such a cool picture. And you experienced that frustration and disappointment. The kids that love to come bowling, and then at Bible study they all split, like that most youth pastors in their 20s and 30s, and you're a 13-year-old experiencing that. Like, come on, guys.
Right.
So let's fast forward a little. You mentioned Dane at the beginning. Where does he intersect this story?
When I went to India, Teen Missions provides buses, and I got on that bus, and there was probably like 50 of us from New England that were being taken down to the boot camp in Florida. And that was the first time I had met other kids my age who loved the Lord, were passionate about Him the way that I was. So that was like my very first experience. I want to say I was 18 at the time. And so for 2 days I was on this bus with these people, and they were singing like Amy Grant songs, Stephen Curtis Chapman songs. I was like, who are these people? I really thought I had died and gone to heaven. I was like, finally, people who get me. Yeah. And I was learning all these new songs. I didn't, I was like, wow, this is cool. They even have cool songs that talk about Jesus,
Love me some Amy Grant.
Yes. And then we get to the boot camp in Florida, and we get let out at the boot camp. And there was like 1,500 teenagers from Canada and all over the United States. And I was like, no, wait a minute, this is really heaven. I've finally really died and gone to heaven. There's other people like me. And that was just kind of like, my world was just blown away. It was just amazing. And so we were there for 2 weeks, and we got trained, and the Lord just opened up this whole new world for me. I was starting to learn things and applying it to my life and where I was at that moment. I've always read the Bible. I mean, I went to church, that was part of our life. But for me, it was always like, oh, that's for adults or that. But finally, it's like the people at the boot camp were like, no, this applies to your life right now. And this is how that makes sense. This is how that looks now. And so I was like, oh, I get it. That's when I really felt like I started walking with the Lord more. I don't want to say, it just kind of all made sense. It all came together at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I almost picture like the roots just going deeper in that time, which is so interesting because for me it was a missions trip. The same. I feel like we need to just stop and shout out for missions organizations that bring young people and give them these opportunities, because I would say the same was for me, and it's probably for so many kids to put your kid in an environment where they're surrounded by people their own age who love Jesus, who are walking with him, literally can transform a kid's life. And I know as someone who's led missions trip and now as a mom, it can be scary to send your kid out there, like how your dad was feeling about going to India, you know, his baby girl. Like there's a lot, and they're legitimate fears. I brought kids to Mexico the week after there's been a headline about some awful crimes happening, and those parents just courageously sending their kids. And I think about the kids from those trips and how they're walking with God now and the part that trip played in their life. And I just love that that's part of your story. Dane worked for the mission organization, is that right?
So he hasn't come into the picture yet because I was like 18. I didn't get to meet him until I was 19, turning 20, so just like a year and a half later. Teen missions was my idea. Well, not my idea, but I was the one who went on this mission trip, and I came home just so on fire for the Lord. And then, of course, you kind of know we go back to reality. We go back to real life. And you have changed, but you go back to the same things. And so for a while, I was able to keep that. But the church that we were at, their youth pastor had just left. So when we moved to New Hampshire, we started visiting a church and became a part of that church, but their youth pastor had just left. And so again, I was in a situation where there just wasn't a lot for me. But when I came back, I was like, I'm going to find a church. And I was old enough to drive at that point, so I was able to find something that worked. It was like my senior year of high school. So a lot of changes coming up then. My parents, while I was in India, my parents had written me a letter saying that they were going to put the house for sale and they were going to move to Florida. So huge changes in that short amount of time. Wow. So I, just kind of discovered this whole new world with the Lord. My senior year of high school, making decisions about going to college, where I was going to go, knowing that my parents were going to sell a house and move to Florida. Was I going to go with them? Was I going to stay and go to college? During the senior year of high school, I was looking for college to go to, and I decided to go to Gordon College. So excited. I was going to be in elementary school, elementary education major. I was writing to my roommates, So in that summer, my parents moved to Florida, and I was writing to my roommates during that time. And like 2 weeks before I was supposed to go to Gordon, already writing to my roommates. My parents had moved to Florida because they had a job. I think they were working in a ministry. Something happened, and they were not able to continue there in that ministry. So they had to find, real life jobs, kind of like, in a secular, just to make ends meet. And so they said, we're not going to be able to send you up to Gordon for the first semester. Why don't you start school down here, community college in town, and we'll send you in January. Well, that just wasn't. No, it was like they had pulled the rug from under me. I was devastated. I had to repeat 8th grade because I was a naughty girl. I was older than most of my classmates, and I just felt that here I am, 19 years old, and again, my wings are being clipped, so to speak. I can't really get off on my own, can't start. I don't want to go to community college. Here I wanted to go to Gordon, Christian college. And so inwardly I started to rebel. I don't feel like I was ever very rebellious, but that really just...
Except in 8th grade, apparently.
Yeah, that's another story.
Just thought I'd call you out on that.
That's true. But this time I was really being rebellious.
It's fine. We all rebelled in 8th grade.
Shh. Yeah. And so that was really hard for me. And I even asked my dad, I said, hey, if I work really hard and get enough money, maybe find a roommate or two, would you let me move out of the house and get an apartment? Nope. You know, I'm come from the Hispanic background in Puerto Rico. I'm the oldest daughter. I'm also like the first generation that from my family that lives here in the United States. So it's like a very different culture that I grew up than my parents grew up. You didn't just move out of the house when you turned a certain age. You know, usually you lived at home until you got married. So that's what I did.
Me too. Can't blame you. I'm judging you so hard right now.
So that was a hard year for me, you know, just moving to Florida. Again, trying to find myself there. I didn't have any friends, just moving to a new place. Wanting to try to start life on my own, as independent as possible, while still having an 11 o'clock curfew. You know, and so I would leave. As soon as I got up in the morning, I would leave, go to school, you know, and then come home like at 10:59.
Hey, it's before 11.
Yes,
So.
yes. So that was my freshman year of college. So at the end of that year, in March, I had been dating someone and we had broken up. I had been going to a Bible study on campus. The guy who led the Bible study wanted to have like a end of the year kind of gathering. There was a lady who wanted to host our college campus group at her house. And so she would make us lunch, and she made these fabulous lunches. So she said, hey, if I make you guys lunch, you guys come and have the Bible study here during lunch. And the ticket to come for a free lunch, homemade meal, is so you have to bring other people from campus to come. We thought that was all great fun. Also, it happened to be that Dane had started that Bible study 2 years prior. This was all at Gainesville, Florida, so where the University of Florida is. And there's also a community college in town. He had gone to school at Santa Fe Community College for 2 years, and then he transferred to UF. When he transferred over to UF, he had left the Bible study in the care of his friend Lance. And Lance was the one that was doing the Bible study. So he knew Dane was about to graduate and leave. And so he's like, hey, you need to come back and come and see how big the group has grown before you leave.
Because I need free lunch.
Well, he wanted Dane to be able to see how much, you know, what he had started.
Oh, yeah.
You know. Dane came and he met me there. And the rest is history.
Nice try. She's really trying to smooth over those.
Yeah.
So you're 19 at this point?
Yes. When I met him, I was 19.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But you married young as well. Mm-hmm. So from meeting him to...
So we met at the end of March. I turned 20 at the end of April. And we got married in August.
Wow. The man wastes no time. So married young, mm-hmm. which, at least my own personal experience of that, brings its own challenges.
Yeah. So one of the things that attracted me to Dane was just his fervent heart for God. It was very obvious. I know that I wanted to serve the Lord, and it just kind of made sense. He was offering me something that I've always wanted to. I always wanted to get married. And certainly, you know, I'm a romantic at heart. But also, I told him that my heart was for ministry, that I really felt God was calling me to missions, and that's what I wanted to do. And he's like, well, I don't know if God's calling me to missions. He said, but I know God's calling me to ministry. And so, well, maybe that will work, you know. And I said, well, I remember, you know, my dad was a pastor. And so I was like, well, that would be, you know, that's serving the Lord. And I asked him, I said, do you think at some point you'd be interested in missions? And he's like, yeah, why not? You know, we had a lot of long talks. And for me, it's like seeing his heart for the Lord. I knew that he would honor God. And so in thus honoring God, he's going to honor me. He had gotten recruited by Teach for America. And that was my heart, was also for teaching. And so he had gotten recruited to go to New York, I think, to work with Teach for America and teach. And he didn't really want to go to New York. So then he asked if they would consider him somewhere down south. And so they asked him to go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so his plan was to go to Baton Rouge and then come back at Christmas and get married. And then I would go with him. And I was like, there's nothing here for me. Why don't you just take me with you? Let's just get married now, and then we'll just start our new life together. He's like, sure. So we got married on a Saturday. We got in the car.
Actual wedding, or this is like Vegas style chapel?
So he graduated in May. And then Teach for America needed to train him on how to be a teacher. So they sent him out to Los Angeles, where I think in California they have like year-round schools.
Yep.
So he worked for the summer. And then he was supposed to show up to the school in Baton Rouge like August 20th. So he came home August 16th. We got married August 18th. We got in the car right after the ceremony. We drove to Louisiana. We found an apartment, and he started working the next day.
Wow. I want to say how romantic, but it doesn't really fit.
No.
I'm glad it worked for you. We all have our own journeys. We'll go with that. Give me just a glimpse of your marriage to Dane, because there's always that what we think going in, and then there's reality. Yeah, I was like, is there a nicer way to say that?
I think the opportunity to get married was like an adventure for me, and especially because we were going to be moving to Louisiana, somewhere just different that I didn't know. And then also the opportunity, and he's telling me that, yes, ministry and missions, and that's all, yes, that's something I really wanted. But I would not recommend getting married to someone that you really don't know. I didn't really know him, and it takes time to really get to know somebody. When we got to Louisiana, he had a job, and he started working right away. And I was home, setting up house and, playing house, so to speak. But it was hard. It was hard because I had one idea of what marriage was going to look like. And he, I don't know what he thought, but he was happy. He had his wife, and he had a job, and life was good, And so that first year was very difficult for me. I was 10 hours away from my parents. But I knew God did that. God orchestrated that because he knew I would have run home probably every single weekend that first year. And that was a long drive. We only had one car. So that didn't happen. That really drove me closer to the Lord. That really drove me. He's all I had at that moment. And so I remember running to the bookstore and buying a book by Cynthia Heald called Loving Your Husband. I need to understand how this marriage things work because it's not really what I thought it would be. There's a quote in that book by Ruth Graham Bell just talking about if we try to put all those expectations for your husband to fill all those needs that only God can, you're really setting that person up for disappointment. It's an expectation that they cannot meet, and it's not fair to them. And so through that Bible study and many, many, many more others, I came to realize that Jesus was the one that needed to fill that need. But yeah, it was still we were very different personalities, so I think it was just hard. It was hard for me. And you got to know Dane. Yeah. You got to work with him, and he said what he thought and what he felt, and he wasn't afraid to share. I'm a people pleaser. And so I would just stuff everything in.
Either that can balance each other out, but then there's also it can be toxic in that kind of, and I know that because my marriage has similar, I can be totally a people pleaser and clam up or whatever. And Andy, it's one of the things I love about him, but he can be much more, I don't even know if it's logical, just see it without all the emotion kind of flooding in. So I've learned a lot from him, but then there are moments where that makes it really hard between us too. So you have how many kids
4
enter the picture? 4 beautiful kids.
Yes.
I just feel like I should add that because they are.
I think they are.
And then kind of a big turn of events in your life. What year was Dane's diagnosis?
So I want to say 2013.
What is that as the wife to go from, your life and everything as it is, and then all of a sudden there's this really serious diagnosis?
So the summer that Dane got diagnosed, we had this great opportunity to go visit his friend from military days. Dane served as a Marine before he went to university. So one of his Marine buddies he had found him on Facebook or something like that, and his friend invited him to come down and visit him. His friend lived on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, and he had like a house on the lake, on the bay. And so he said, come on down. And they had like all the toys, you know, jet skis and canoes and the RVs and the four-wheelers and just everything. And I think Dane had gone before with my boys and they had gone shooting and just all these, you know, fun boy things.
It's like a man's dream world.
Exactly. Exactly. And they had invited us to come down. Dane's like, free vacation? Yeah, we're there, you know. I think it was the first day we got there. Our host was like, would you guys like to go out on the jet skis? I was like, yes. There was a lighthouse in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. It's called Point No Point. And it was about maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles out from the house. And so he's like, so our goal is to get to the lighthouse. It's a really cool destination. So the day that we went out, the water was kind of choppy. And I think it was, you know, all of our first time on the jet skis. So he saw that we were a little bit nervous and, you know, we had the little kids. So we shortened the ride and we just drove out to like a close little beach. And then we came back. So the next day, the sky was beautiful. The water was perfect. And I was like, who wants to go out on the jet ski? And nobody wanted to go out. And I was like, fine, I'll go by myself, you know? And so I had never driven a jet ski except for the day before. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to drive out there like 2 miles by myself. And I said, okay, well, it's an adventure. And so I made sure everybody knew where I was going to go. I said, okay, if I'm not back in an hour, you know, send the Coast Guard out. I didn't want to take my phone in case it fell. I'd lose it. But I was a little bit nervous that I was going to be out there by myself. One of the things, during that time, there was a lot of jellyfish. And so I remember getting in the jet ski and just looking down the water. It's like, wow. So if I fall in, I'm going to get stung. I picked the little red jet ski and I went off. And so I just remember, I just kind of felt that the Lord said to me, stay focused on the lighthouse. And so that's true. If I just stay focused on that, I won't be looking down. I'm not going to fall. Okay. The day before there was a lot of people on the water, but that day it was like nobody. And this is the Chesapeake Bay, so I remember seeing like these big tankers, you know, out in the horizon and stuff like that. There was like nothing in my peripheral. It was very unusual. So I'm riding out there, and the word that I think about is ethereal. It was like all of a sudden the horizon disappeared and the sky and the ocean just became like one color. And all I could see was the lighthouse. And again, just very strange because there was nobody in my periphery, and I drove out to the lighthouse. And this lighthouse is right in the middle of the bay. So it's not on a fixed piece of land. And so you can't park the jet ski. You have to just like ride around, driving around. So I'm riding around. Okay, so after I'd had my little praise and worship time, I said, okay, it's time to go. They're probably worried, you know, about me. But I couldn't leave. And I kept circling, and I was like, okay, Lord, is there something that you want to say to me? Because I really feel your presence here. There's something that's keeping me here, and I don't understand, so please speak to me. And all I could hear him say, or I could feel him saying to me, was, stay focused on me. So I'm like, well, I always have, Lord. I always have stayed focused on you, you know, or our Dane's ministry is amazing, and I love what I'm doing. You know, my ministry at that moment was my children at home, and I think I was involved with the women's Bible study at church and the youth with Dane. So I didn't really understand, but it wasn't like a warning. It was just kind of like a comforting, or just like a reminder. Stay focused on me. And so I kind of looked up at the lighthouse, and I thought about what a lighthouse represents. You know, strength in the storm, a light in the darkness, just all those things. And so I just said, you know, I just started praising the Lord again and just thank you for just always being so faithful. Thank you for just this provision. Thank you for the blessings in my life. And then kind of like for the third time, I said, Lord, is there something that... And all I could hear him say was just stay focused on me. Stay focused on the lighthouse. Okay. Dane had been struggling that summer. He'd say to me, you know, I'm reading the Bible, but the words are getting all jumbled up. I'm typing, but I'm forgetting where home row is. and I'm having a hard time with the letters on the cell phone. I thought it was probably just a little bit of nervousness. I wasn't going to go with him to Ecuador that summer. So we were just chalking it up to you're just stressed, all these things. So when he got to Ecuador, I think he kind of was noticing that, this was like the 5th or 6th time he had done this very same trip. And he was like forgetting things or just mixing up things. And even the people with him were like, dude, you know this schedule inside and out. What's going on? And he's like, I don't know, man, So when he got home, he went to the doctor. He had an exam and everything came out fine. The doctor did say, let's just go for a CAT scan just in case. Everything looks good, but let's just, just to be okay. And I also have my nursing license. I'm an LPN. So I was like, he doesn't need a CAT scan. And I remember thinking, no, I'm kind of like a naturopathic. I like, starting to go more the way of natural healing kind of thing. So I'm like, let's not put more radiation in your body, kind of thing. But I remember the nurse behind the desk saying, your insurance is going to cover it. So let's just do it. It's fine. It's not going to cost you anything. And Dane was all about free or inexpensive. So he's like, oh, we'll just get it done, He's
like, it's on sale. We
exactly.
have to do it.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, fine. He had the CAT scan done. And we had kind of just gotten back from that vacation. And that weekend, Grace Baptist was having like this big kickoff meeting, church service on Sunday. And we had really worked up this, we were inviting like everybody from, Marlboro and everybody from Hudson, and so it was going to be like an outdoor thing. Remember that Hunter had broken his arm that summer, so Dane was going to the doctor and Hunter was going to the doctor, and it was all at UMass. And so I don't know what happened, but we got home on a Thursday and Hunter was like, yeah, the doctor called. So what did he say? Well, I don't know. Like, well, Hunter, you're going to the doctor, but Dad's going to the doctor too, so who was it? Well, I don't know. All right, we're just going to have to wait. Maybe that was like a Friday, so we knew we had to wait till Monday to call the doctor back. We did this big thing on Sunday. It was amazing. A lot of people came to know the Lord. We were able to celebrate Eli's birthday, and it was awesome. And then on Monday, Dane decides to go visit a chiropractor that's in Hudson. And he's like a neuro chiropractor. And so he's like, bring me the CD for the CT scan. I'll read it. I can read it. Dane took it to him, and he was the one. He's like, yeah, that's not good. It's not good. So he called me at the house, and he's like, you need to come right away. And I just remember looking at the calendar, and my Lighthouse moment happened 2 weeks to the day that we got Dane's diagnosis. So 2 weeks before, God just kind of comforted me.
His official diagnosis was stage 4 glioblastoma. Is that?
Yes.
For those who may not know, that's obviously the most aggressive form of brain cancer. So the diagnosis comes, treatment, I'm sure all kind of a whirlwind, but walk us forward from there.
Sure.
Yeah.
So our friend, the chiropractor, said, this is what it is. He said, but because I'm in the neuro business, I know the top people at Mass General, I'll get you hooked up. And he did. He hooked us up with the best people at Mass General. And Dane had an appointment like 2 days later. It was really quick. And so when we got to Mass General, the surgeon that was going to do the surgery, he walks in, and he's wearing a Scottish Terrier tie. And I look at him, and I was like, do you have a Scottish Terrier? He's like, no. Why? And I was like, because of your tie. And he's like, oh, well, I didn't have my dog's breed, so I bought this one instead. And I was like, you don't understand. So we have a Scottish Terrier. And I said, God had you wear that tie for us. It's like, I know that you're the man that God chose for this. And he just kind of smiled at me, kind of like, okay, But it was like another sign. When Dane's primary care doctor finally did get in touch with us, he apologized profusely. He's like, I'm so sorry I was not able to get in touch with you on Thursday. I was just leaving on vacation. And I was like, you don't understand. You weren't supposed to call us that day, because that would have ruined my son's birthday, and it would have kind of overshadowed this huge thing that we've been working on at church, where the Lord did amazing things. And if the church had gotten that message that weekend, I think it would have been very difficult to have that service on Sunday. So it was perfect timing.
God knows, for sure. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to take us a little bit forward here, because Dane did pass away. Was it a year?
13 months.
13 months after his diagnosis. And so from being, I'm going way back to that beach, wife, mom of 4 on this vacation, to, that was only 2 weeks before, so really only 13 to 14 months later, you're a single mom looking at your 4 babies and walking through the loss of your husband. I have to believe that the number of listeners we have, that there are likely women who have walked through this journey themselves or are walking through it right now. Tell me a little, in that season for you, what did it look like for God to show up for you?
There was so many things in the story, but God was very faithful. And there's a lot of things that happened during the time of Dane's illness where the Lord was just really saying to me, there's a lot of things that you've kept buried deep inside. Now it's time to bring those things up. And it was really hard because as a pastor's wife, it's like, I just felt that it was hard to share my heart because I didn't want things that were bothering me to really overshadow his ministry, or even I didn't want people to think badly of him because we were having difficulties in our marriage. But I just felt like I didn't feel like I was free to share with anybody.
Right.
And so I think the Lord just said, okay, there's a lot of things that you've been keeping very down deep inside, and now it's time to bring those to the light. And so that kind of just began my struggle of dealing with a lot of things. And so when Dane passed away, I really felt like I went the other way from the Lord, and I kind of went into this other rebellion, so to speak. But it was also very hard because here we have a whole church that's grieving for him and who really miss him. And I was just angry. I was just angry. And I wasn't angry at the Lord that he had taken him, because I kind of spent 13 months kind of processing all that. But I was angry that I wasn't able to settle things with Dane, so to speak, or just angry that the Lord just didn't give me answers, and that we couldn't, resolve certain things. But the Lord made it very clear. He's like, you're not really angry at Dane. You're angry at me because there were a lot of things in your life that you wanted it one way, it didn't happen the way you wanted. But I'm a big God, so you can come to me, come with me with all those things. And so that first year, I think it was just, I was numb and in shock. I got married at 20. I left my parents' house and I got married. So it's like, I didn't know how to live on my own. It's kind of like, and here I have 4 babies and a mortgage. I don't even have my degree yet. So it was just kind of learning how to pay the bills. It was kind of just learning to take care of the house. It was kind of learning to ask for help. It was kind of learning to just figure out who I was, and just kind of learning to do all those things, and just kind of really find myself in God. I think for many years, Dane was kind of my God. That's, I put a lot of my dependence on him and a lot of my expectations on him. I think that the Lord was just saying, he never was, he never could be, I am. And so let's learn to do that.
It's hard not to get even emotional hearing you talk, because as a wife and a mom, that journey that you walked is honestly one of those great fears that a lot of wives, especially I'm similar, got married really young and don't have my degree, and that what if something were to happen? And you walked through that journey, and obviously you're sitting here today. Your kids are doing phenomenal. What were some of the things that were most helpful to you? I'm just thinking about people trying to come alongside of their friends. And what did you find most helpful for you in that process with how people supported or loved you, even in the angry season, what did that look like?
I had an amazing church. Grace Baptist was just amazing. They carried me through that year. And so they had a year to prepare on how to take care of me. And so they did a phenomenal job just setting things up and putting people in place who really looked after us, looked after me, looked after my children. Also, I think I had to learn, like a lot of people I know would say things trying to be kind, but I was angry, and so it was even just asking me, how are you? Sometimes I would be like, I have no idea how to respond to that. I don't really know. You know, and so sometimes that was hard, and so for a season I had to leave the church because it was like I felt like everybody was, you know, and I didn't know how to answer, and I didn't want to answer ungraciously, but I just didn't know what to say. You know, I didn't know how I was. I didn't really know how I was. I also had to learn to just be able to just say what I needed. And so when people would say, what can I do for you? I really want to help. And I'm like, do you really want to help? Well, these are the things I really need, you know, and for people to be able to just hear my very basic, you know, needs. You know, I really need someone to drive this child here. I really need someone to pick this child up. I really would love if someone could just go grocery shopping for me, because right now I just cannot get out of bed. Things like that.
I think it's so good to remember that sometimes we feel this pressure that we have to have all the right words and we have to do these big acts of like whatever, generosity. And often in times when people are mourning or walking through something difficult, it is the little menial tasks that can be the most helpful, like those little things that for us are like, oh, that's no big deal at all, and you're like, well, it's a big deal for me. Like if you grocery shop, that's a big deal for me. I love that people stepped up in that. So gosh, it's so hard to transition even beyond that, but it's been 4 years.
Yes.
You have a grandchild.
I do.
Let's just have that moment. A beautiful grandchild.
Yes.
Maddie's been married.
Yes.
But there's more news than that, because we can't get through the episode without getting to kind of huge news. I mean, you already announced it on Facebook, so I don't feel like we're like breaking news. But do you want to tell us a little bit about this new season that you're entering?
Sure. So about 2 years ago, I went on Match.com, and I met this amazing guy, and
he's sitting in the studio. I just want to out him right now. He's like, it's really warm, and I'm dozing off over here.
So I put it really blatantly out there on my Match profile that I love the Lord and I had 4 kids. I mean, those are like the 2 biggest things in my life at that moment. It's like, if you don't love the Lord and you don't love kids, don't even look at my profile. And a lot of guys weren't just paying attention to that. They were just, you know, I don't know what they were looking at, but he was the only one who responded with, I love the fact that you love the Lord. That was his line. And I was like, I got to meet this guy.
Well played, sir.
Yes. So last night he got down on one knee in front of my kids and he proposed.
All right, you're going to wreck me. Hold on. In front of your kids.
In front of my kids. Not just that, but he said to me, I know that Dane left a legacy and I want to leave a legacy too. I want to be part of that legacy. So it was just kind of,
You just like, I have goosebumps and I feel, all right, that's it. Amen and amen. How was the response from your kids?
They've always loved Rocky, David. When we first met, I told him that the one that he needed to win over was Eli.
How old is Eli now?
Eli's 17. Wow. Just turned 17.
Is he the youngest?
Eli's the youngest boy.
Right.
Molly's the youngest child.
Okay.
Yes. So Eli's the one that's most like Dane. And I remember early on when we were dating, David asked me, he's like, do you think Dane would have liked me? I was like, absolutely. Dane would have seen your heart right away. He loved you very much.
Just thinking through for you, the processing, now I'm looking at him, I'm sorry, it's not even, he won't give me an interview, so I'll slip him into yours. But those thoughts, like processing through that is kind of its own journey as well, right? But I'm assuming that you won Eli over.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think David works with kids and teenagers, and so I think he knew just to give Eli some space and just be present, and when Eli was ready, he would, make his way towards him.
And for you, since there's a ring, I'm assuming you responded very positively to this proposal. Is there a date? I'll ask the question everybody wants to know first.
As soon as school is over next summer.
Okay.
So hopefully no snow days.
This is not going to be a repeat of your last where you're like, we'll get married then. And then you're just like, just kidding. We're getting married today.
No, Eli's a senior. He's class president. He needs to finish this year strong. And Eli also wants to go to Gordon, so I'm going to live vicariously through Eli.
Oh. Did you just feel that full circle come in there? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, you're, again, one of these guests that I'm like, I feel like we're going to have you on multiple times because I could go so many directions.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, thank you for being willing to share your story. It has been a gift and really inspiring. I almost feel like that word is overused, but I'm going to throw it in, inspiring to watch you even wrestle through the journey of this, because I'm someone who grew up in the church and spent a lot of time learning the and I'm putting quotation on the right thing to say and the right emotion to have for whatever thing. And I just have this massive amount of respect for people who can get angry and go before God with that, and who can wrestle in their faith, and even to come out and say that. I just feel like there's such a freedom in that. And personally, I feel so passionate about that for this next generation coming up, is to really encourage that in them. Like, listen, God is so much bigger than your wrestlings and your doubt and all these things. Like, he wants you to bring these things to him.
Yes.
You don't have to always say the right thing. You don't always have to feel the right thing. Like, feelings are just feelings. That's what they are, and it's okay.
Yes.
And so I love that about your story and just your willingness and vulnerability to share that. I just appreciate it. There's so many questions, but there's only one I cannot avoid, because it is, and every time I apologize because it feels like a pendulum swing. But in all of your amazingness, Loyda, I really need to know, what is actually superficial about you?
I've wrestled long and hard with this because I knew it was coming. I really like People magazine.
Yes. Wait, do you subscribe to People magazine? No. But when you go places and it's there, yes.
Yes.
Are you a hair salon People magazine kind of lady?
I'm like, check out the grocery when I go to the acupuncturist. It's kind of like,
I just feel like I need to know what's going on.
Yes.
We just had a moment. It was beautiful. I have to tell you, though, that I used to be a checkout line People magazine, because why not? You're stuck there. And my daughter is like taken on the role of the Holy Spirit or something, and she won't let me pick up any of it. She's like, Mom, you don't want to read those magazines. They're junk. And I was like, you're right. I was just testing you to see. Good job. You passed. Oh, I love that one. And that's the first of the People magazine. And we all know there's other readers out there, and they just haven't admitted it. Well, gosh, Loyda, thank you so much for your time and for being willing to share today.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Okay, we've arrived. We are officially at the outro of my first interview of season 3. And the reason that this even matters is because I thought maybe I should just start this before we even talk about Loyda's interview and just owning something that's a little personal and vulnerable and, to be honest, embarrassing about myself. As I was thinking about season 3 and going into this alone, this section of the podcast was the hardest one, because intros, I'm like, we can intro someone. That's not a big deal. I love doing the interviews. But then talking about it afterwards, all by myself, can I just be really brutally honest? Since I was fairly young, I'm going to pinpoint it back to middle school, and I got held back a year. I really wrestle with believing the lie that I am just not smart. And as I thought about doing these things by myself, this fear of people realizing how dumb I am, or doing these things and people seeing for the first time, like, wow, this isn't so good after all. And all this insecurity bubbling up inside, a fear of rejection, I don't know, like fear of disappointing people, fear of people not liking Hey Girl when I go out on my own. And that being like when I had co-hosts, it was almost like we were in it together, but people rejecting it when it's just me feels so much more personal. I shared this with my best friend, and you gotta love like true best friends. As she messaged me back to say, listen, I love you, and you know that I'm a fan. I forget how she worded it, but but she did say, not everyone's gonna love Hey Girl. Not everyone's gonna love what you do, and that's okay. And I just stopped, and I don't know, it was an aha powerful moment for me to remember why I'm doing Hey Girl in the first place, and a kind of a like healthy slap in the face, like, girl, this isn't about everybody liking you or being impressed with what you do or listening to you and being like, wow, she's so insightful and wise. This is about being obedient to God and embracing who I am. And I'm not saying embracing as in that I'm dumb, but not trying to be something I'm not trying to sound smarter or wiser or more insightful, being willing to say, I don't even know the answer to that. And so as I go into this first outro, we talk about a little bit about Loyda's interview. I thought, why not start out after an interview where someone was so vulnerable and open with her story, to be vulnerable and open about where I'm at with this podcast and going into this first outro. So here's the deal. Loved Loyda's episode. I am going to give you the one thing that was like a punch in the throat for me, a good punch in the throat. When she talked so openly about her own anger and wrestling after her husband passed away, when she talked honestly about her marriage and that, you know what, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. And I am someone that has grown up being in ministry, that since the day I got married, we have been in full-time vocational ministry. And I know just the pressure that it can be to put on this front, this facade that we somehow just have it all together. And I also know that it's a big fat lie because I live that struggle, and I've walked through these places of anger and doubt and all of the same things that everybody walks through in their own faith and in their own marriages. And I just have such a heart for people being willing to speak freely about that so that other people know that they're not alone and that they're not going crazy. That, you know, just because you're in marriage where two people love the Lord and are chasing hard after him does not mean that your marriage is going to be without challenges and without struggle, because it's two broken, sinful human beings that are living together. At times it's going to go bad, and sometimes really, really bad. And so I know there are all the things we could talk about, but I just wanted to touch on that because it really challenged me, and I'm going to have to think and pray about this. But I'm thinking that at some point in this season, I would love to drag my producer / husband onto this podcast and maybe talk a little more openly about our own marriage, because I think there are some of you out there that of this whole story and everything that happened in her life, that was a thing that you just needed to hear today, that it's okay, and that all of us we're walking our own journeys. But just if your marriage is struggling or it's not, you know that Instagram portrays it much different than it really is behind closed doors. Just that one, you're not alone, that God sees you and he's with you. And two, you're not crazy or even just like nobody would ever understand. There are lots of us out there that completely understand. And girl, I just want you to know that today I'm saying a prayer for you, whoever you are. If it's, maybe it's not a girl, maybe it's the husband listening, whoever you are, I'm saying a prayer for you today that you find somebody in your life that can be a support and an encouragement to you, whether it's your own faith journey, whether it's in your marriage, your parenting, whatever it is. And as always, in every single episode, I just want to encourage you, wherever God has you, keep running your race in your place. Be encouraged today that God's with you and he's for you. And in case you didn't realize this already, I am one of your biggest fans. Bye, girls.